It's Mark Holthy here with another episode of our Immigration Nation Canadian Style. I am super fortunate to have the past chair of the CBA National Immigration Section, Ravi Jain, join me today to talk about what happened last year and I guess to a large extent, what's been happening even into these early months of 2021. And I guess we ultimately don't know how long this is going to happen, but the impact of the pandemic on Canada and the immigration programs. And specifically what we're going to do today is we're going to pull back the curtain and just talk a little bit about what was happening in the background as all of this that we've seen now unfold over the last year, basically from an immigration lawyer perspective. So we'll see you in just a bit. Okay, like I said, we are going to invite now Ravi to join us. How are you, Ravi?
I'm great, Mark. So nice to be
Awesome.
here with you.
Good. Well, I know we've been kind of dancing around a little bit, trying to find a time where it worked for both of us to get on here and just have a little chat about that crazy. Well, we're still in the midst of the insanity, aren't we?
We are, and I've been in your shoes, as the immediate past chair, and of course you're the chair this year, and it isn't easy to sort of coordinate schedules when you've basically taken on a full-time job as a volunteer to
Yeah.
help run the national section. So
What
it's
did you say, Ravi? You said volunteer? Like I thought I was getting paid hundred
oh,
thousand
you're not going to
dollars
get
this
checked,
year to
Mark.
do this. Did you not tell them that I wasn't doing this for free? Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Now
exactly.
we've got some issues, right? Like, yeah,
Hmm.
entirely volunteer, right? And so that's the fun part. And I'll show you
Yeah.
here, Ravi, as well. So obviously, COVID-19, how immigration lawyers helped Canada navigate the pandemic. And this may sound a little aggrandizement. This may sound a little bit over the top with this title, but this is a reality. And so what we want to explain and at least show the listeners and those who are watching just some of the things that were going on in the background as this was all unfolding, because I think we all have a vivid memories of how it seemed like every day something else was changing, and it was literally
Hmm.
making policy on the fly that usually would have taken the government 2-3 months to develop. They were doing it in days and weeks, and mistakes were made clearly, and there's the logistical nightmare of trying to get the messaging out, and that's to a large extent where we fit in, was trying to help them in that communication role to a large extent.
Hmm. Well, also, I mean, I remember I was in the Dominican Republic with my family and taking a bit of a break after, in a pretty intense year for me. And I remember the government started reaching out. Folks at the Canadian Bar Association started reaching out because, of course, we had planned an entire in-person conference that then required us to plan an entire online conference. So we essentially planned two conferences in that year. Yeah, the government reached out. I remember, I had to find a quiet place and get on the calls. And they were looking for some guidance. They were looking for some kind of direction in terms of where things should go. I mean, they were in crisis. They themselves were not going into the office, and everyone was pivoting. We were pivoting in the private bar, and they were pivoting in terms of government. So, but I think what it did show is it showed that the strength of the relationship. I think that the for the government to be reaching out and asking questions and looking for ideas, and then not only that they reached out, but that they basically were reaching out to have weekly meetings. I mean, that was unusual, right? I mean, we were used to sort of meeting with them biannually and spending several days of our time away from our practices and our families, going to Ottawa, and they wanted us to get on calls with them on a weekly basis. And we started to see the problems as the border started to close down. I mean, this was monumental change, right? I mean, we'd never in the history, certainly as long as I've been practicing, had I seen American citizens being told to sort of turn around, and they were sleeping on the floors in airports, and then they were being removed from the country. I mean, we'd never treated such an important ally and neighbor in this way. And to have people separated and the stories we were hearing and the heartbreak, and it wasn't just immigration, right? I mean, I think I asked CBSA, the Border Service Agency, to join, and then of course we were used to talking with ESDC, the Department of Labor, a little bit, and then later on I asked Public Health to join because all of a sudden our practices were pivoting towards like quarantine law and like
Yeah.
things that we'd never had to think about or worry about before. So it was a lot of it was a lot of uh, bringing together of the various players because we realized that the border folks were really where it was at in terms of they were ultimately making the decisions. Immigration was producing guidance, and they thought the rules were one thing and that they'd be interpreted in one way. And then we realized that the border agency, the border officers were taking it in a totally different direction. And then because they were, constantly, the orders in council, which are the laws that were passed by cabinet without having to go to parliament, and they were, because immigration generally can change so rapidly in our country versus the United States, with rules being able to come out without Parliament necessarily having to pronounce on them, and not even the government writ large or the department officials. There's more just cabinet sort of producing these new changes, and then having to constantly digest them. But it was it was a crazy period, right? It was a crazy period in our practice and our lives. I'll never forget it.
Yeah. And I can tell you as the incoming chair last year, when I watched what you did, Ravi, and this is what people don't understand. So Ravi has a full practice. So he has a family, he has a life. And very quickly, Ravi became the central disseminator of information related to everything, everything related to the travel restrictions, to quarantine, to all of these areas that are completely outside of our practices. We'd never, ever really dealt with them in this way. Ravi really stepped up and became the point of contact for not just, his clients and the people that represent him, but for pretty much every immigration lawyer across the country that's a part of the Canadian Bar Association. But I know it went further than that. And, every day, like you said, we'd get some new notification on the government website, and they would be doing their best to try to disseminate this information in a way that the average person could consume. And the information that was posted on those sites was often conflicting with the orders in council. And then Ravi would have 1,000 lawyers all sending him emails directly. Well, Ravi, what does this mean? Or I have a client that wants to come in and I don't know what this means. Can they travel? Can they board? Will CBSA turn them around? And so I can't tell you how many months, and I can say whatever I want, Ravi, so you just sit there and blush. I don't care. For how many months Ravi was basically the immigration lawyer for all the other immigration lawyers, telling them how to manage their practices, how to advise their clients. And it was unbelievable. I have never, ever seen a chair in the past, nor I don't think there ever will be in the future, and I mean this sincerely, who gave so much to our section and to the lawyers and overall. And he's not joking when he said he really drove the ship on putting together all these government departments that traditionally weren't even talking to each other. And, for most of us, we can't even fathom, how is it possible for CBSA to be administering immigration on the ground and they're not even communicating very well with the IRCC? So that's the world that we were in. And it's been quite amazing. And, Ravi had a busy year before he even got onto all of this COVID stuff. And we're not out of it yet. But fortunately, because of the groundwork that Ravi laid, and advising our fellow members that maybe it's not a great idea to always email the chair, he saved me from a lot of the direct emails that he gets. But I think they also realize that Ravi's a whole lot smarter than I am, so they're better off sending emails to him.
I mean, it is obviously it's a team effort. I mean, we're working really well as a team this year. I mean, we've got 2 other table officers besides us. And the work is really being shared, and I'm seeing great communication. It's incredible. I mean, the relationship we have with not only the department and the civil servants, but frankly, the 2 ministers, in particular, Minister Blair and Minister Mendicino, like the immigration minister and the Minister of Public Safety. those relationships, are very strong. And, I think that the ministers generally are a bit more available because they're not constantly going to events, and sure, they're doing um, web video stuff with certain groups. But it's different. It doesn't take the same time to travel there, to travel across the country as ministers are expected to do normally. So they are a bit more available, and I think that they're generally trying to do right by the public and by immigrants, and to navigate these complex issues at the border the best way they can. And so I've noticed, and I think they are generally looking for good ideas, and it's a very different approach. I mean, in previous years, they would just sort of go off and do that on their own. But
Yes.
I think that they are really seeing the benefit of of all the experience of all the immigration lawyers across the country that are more than happy to chip in and write detailed submissions, and give us ideas that we can then communicate. So it's a group effort, a team effort, not only within the leaders of the bar association, but also within the larger membership, frankly.
Yeah.
And the best example of that was when Minister Mendocino, we met with him in January, right? And he was looking for ways to meet his targets. And we won't go into the confidences, and we want to be able to speak to the minister without him thinking that we're going to broadcast everything he said to us.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it's clear because he was public about looking to meet his targets, 401,000 this year. And we went back to the membership, and we got all the ideas, and I spent a few hours sort of organizing them, and then I flipped it over to them, and he adopted one of our main recommendations, which was to lower the points. I didn't think he'd lower it that much, but he he certainly
not even the PNPs knew that he was going to do that.
It's incredible. So,
Yeah.
but he took but that was an idea that came from us. He may have gotten that idea from others as well. And I tweeted about it, and he liked the tweet when I said that, happy to provide this informal feedback to him. So, so that just goes to show, I mean, the fact that he's, he asked to meet with us, number one, then he took our ideas, and then he liked it when we complimented him for adopting it. I mean, we might have implemented it slightly differently. I mean, some people had some complaints about the way he did it, but bottom line is it helped a lot of people who are here, and a lot of our clients who benefited from it, and who are now coming. Maybe they did the profile on their own, and they came to us later or whatever. But I think it showed that there is a very, very strong relationship, and I think I'm very happy about that, and I'm happy to see it continue under your leadership this year. And I think you're doing a phenomenal job. I mean, it's not easy to sort of manage your own practice and your own family life and all the responsibilities as chair. But I think you're doing a phenomenal job. So it's really a pleasure to speak to you about all that we went through.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, Ravi. I really do. And, that's one thing that I knew coming in, that you'd be there to support and guide and tutor and mentor. And it's made a huge difference for me. Now, it's interesting, Ravi, when we think about those early meetings and this shift in our relationship with government and with the department. I remember the years back when it was nothing like it is now. And it was exactly as you indicated. They almost in a token way accepted our submissions and listened to us, but really they had no intention to do anything that was other than what they'd already figured out themselves internally. And there was a real resistance to really hearing anything that we had to say. Even though we are on the ground, we literally see how the policies are affecting real people's lives. But the one thing that was made abundantly clear to me that I want all of the viewers to understand is that the people that are making these decisions are no different than you and I. They are real human beings, and they were thrust into something that boy, I'll tell you, I can't even imagine what that would have been like, trying to
Hmm.
figure out, these difficult decisions, when in many instances, IRCC or immigration, they weren't making the call on a lot of these things.
Hmm.
And, as I look at the comments that are being posted right now, one of the most frequent comments I get, Ravi, is the family reunification thing, and how,
Hmm.
because of the border closures and because of the foreign offices being reduced to skeleton crews, and the fact that, these new confirmations of permanent residence are not being issued, visitor visas are not being issued to spouses, especially in the context of family reunification. There's a lot of people that are extremely upset right now and feeling like
Hmm.
they're just being completely forgotten. And so I do want to make sure that they know that we are advocating. We are constantly advocating for this. And I think, Ravi, you and I, maybe we have some of the same feelings, when it comes to the borders. And I think that there's a balance that maybe hasn't yet been struck. And that's in terms of, like, I don't have a problem with COVID hotels. I don't, Ravi.
Hmm.
It means that we can open up the borders, and that people, when they come through, are going to actually be required to stay in quarantine in a government designated facility. Well, countries like Australia have done that in the past. And my brother
Hmm.
lives there. He's a citizen of Australia. And things are, his kids are playing sports. Like, it's
Hmm.
it's it's a different
Life's
world.
normal, right?
Yeah. And so, we can always look back in hindsight and say it would have been great for them to do certain things over others. But, when I look at what could happen, and I look at ways that maybe the government could start to move, those are some of the directions that I would like to see. And I don't have a problem.
Well,
Now,
at
the
least,
rollout, yeah, I was just
yeah.
going to say the
I
rollout
mean,
of the hotels was not well thought out. I don't think. I think there was a
mhm.
lot of issues with it. It was kind of an edict from on top, and then they were trying to figure it out as they went, which caused huge problems for people. But I do tend to lean more to that, and to, and I want to encourage them to open up and allow these families that are separated to be reunited, which is one of the pillars of the Immigration Act itself. So,
I think the issue for me around all this is about transparency. I think that, one thing that hit me in June, because at that point, the pandemic was sort of raging for about whatever 3 months or so, and it was at our conference, and I had a chance to talk with Minister Blair in public safety, and the stories were coming into the press all the time of people showing up at the border, a spouse of a Canadian, common law partner, or whatever, and child, etc. And they were getting turned around, and people had no idea what the rules were. And I think that people can debate as to whether there should be these quarantine hotels, or whether it should be this, or whether it's that. But to me, I mean, I think that there should be no debate that people should know what the rules are. I mean, and that's, as lawyers, I think that's what troubled us so much, was that we couldn't advise our clients as to the rules because we just didn't know them. And there were actually rules that existed, but they were kept secret. And so when I talked to Minister Blair, I frankly put him on the hot seat a little bit, and I said, Minister, like, could we not just have some transparency? Because we can help you by getting the word out in terms of whatever the rules and criteria are, and less people will show up at the border. And I reminded him that we frankly, I think, shut down flag polling, which was happening, at the start of the pandemic. They didn't want people showing up at the border, exposing officers potentially to COVID if they had COVID. And then, because what happens is, of course, people go to the border when they're in Canada, to then turn around and then get a document like a work permit, for instance, on their way back in. Instead of having to go all the way back to their home country, they flag poll. That's what flag polling is, right?
yes.
And we were asked to help the government and advise people not to do it. Well, we told people that they wouldn't get their work permits, and we told them that flag polling was going to be shut down. And immigration lawyers follow rules. I mean, they're trained, to understand the law and to obey the law, obviously. And they went ahead and advised all their clients not to flag poll, and people listened. And they shut it down. And so and all of a sudden, all these border officers were twiddling their thumbs, and they had nothing to do. And they were overstaffed, and I think the feedback from, I know you remember this, from the folks in Ottawa at the border agency was that it was one of thanks. They thanked us for,
Yeah.
for that message. And so I said to Minister Blair, I said, we did this for you. We're partners here, and we would love to just get some transparency. And he committed. I remember he committed in that conversation I had with him to transparency. And then within a matter of days, maybe a week or two, he came out with actual criteria saying that if you are an immediate family member and you are coming to join for at least 15 days, no problem. And you know what? Once the rule was clear, the border was great. Yeah. I mean, obviously, there's going to be little hiccups here and there with certain officers, but I would say that 99% of the people who fit the criteria got in. And that was phenomenal. And that's really, I think, what our role can be when we talk about this topic and how immigration lawyers affected the pandemic. We affected it by pointing out where there wasn't transparency. That's one of the things we did by putting the minister himself on the hot seat, getting him to commit. He committed to transparency. To Minister Blair's credit, he delivered. And then he came out with even more generous policies like the extended family members and the compassionate situations and the boyfriend and girlfriend cases even, because people need to fall in love and they need to be together. And, it's not just the people that actually are married or common law. You have to get to that point sometimes too. Yeah. And so they even recognize that, and they recognize the sad situations of people coming in for funerals. And of course, that was the source of some of the pandemic spreading. And they were worried about that, but they navigated that, and they said, okay, for compassionate reasons and to say goodbye to a loved one, they were going to allow it now. Right. And so, and then like you said, they, as the criticism came in about how, they didn't shut the border down and other countries were much more fast and acting, et cetera, they decided to go with the quarantine hotels. And, I mean, to me, the main thing is about, like you, I mean, the main thing is about ensuring that we bring in immigrants, and not just, I mean, as we need to focus on people who are here, but we also need to think about those who are coming from abroad, because our numbers are way down. Like we haven't had such a low number of immigration since, whatever, World War II or something. Like it's dismal in terms of the rates. And so and I think what this minister understands is that really immigration, and this includes obviously people coming from abroad who are going to settle for the first time here, it's the economic stimulus that's going to pull us out of this pandemic, given the unbelievable amount of debt we have. I mean, the only way we're going to come out of this recession is if we have immigration, so that we can be part of the stimulus that is needed to kickstart our economy and get things going, and really take off. So anyway, all of which is to say that was something I thought was very good, and I think that we've been working at building these relationships for a few years, and I think that other national chairs have told us both that the relationship has never been this warm and this strong with the highest levels in terms of the ministerial level. And I think we saw how that relationship really resulted in positive change and at the very least transparency. So I'm proud of that. I think we should all be proud of that. And I think you should be proud of the fact that, Minister Mendocino has reached out to you, and we're going to continue to have that relationship. You're going to, interview him at the conference again. I think it's wonderful.
Minister Blair. Yeah, we're just
so it's going to be phenomenal.
Yeah, I think one thing that would be interesting for people is to understand how these calls that we had with immigration actually played out. And so, when they first reached out to us, what's the structure? What is the what's the purpose of the calls? Like, what's the flow of these things? And when we were there, Acadie was there, CAPIC, there was other organizations, representatives that are and continue to be in attendance with these meetings. But the interesting thing is that, and this is what I appreciated most, is it was really hyper-focused on the pandemic and the direct impacts of COVID on immigration. But they recognized, Ravi, that we were seeing on the ground what they couldn't see necessarily on the other side. And so, and for those who are watching, when we would field our questions, the things that our members across the country were experiencing, we would try to pick out the ones that obviously were we didn't have time, we didn't have 5 hours for these calls. So we had to be strategic in what we were asking them for. And we would propose these questions and give them to them in advance. Then they would have a little bit of time to sort it out, to figure out which person, actually had an answer. Some cases they had to take things back because they just weren't sure, which happened a lot. It happened a lot, especially when it related to the actual borders and, exemptions and things like that. But really, this mechanism that they opened up to us to get, well, in those early days, it was almost real-time information, which, like you said, is unheard of. So we had the opportunity to provide our questions in advance and then get those answers, and then a little bit of a Q&A at the very end. But to have that opportunity and to be able to get the source of information, like to get right to that source of information, was invaluable. And then, the moment those meetings were over, we were firing back the answers and sharing those with our members. And every one of those members then used those to advise their clients that they represented. So it was a wonderful tool to help make things better in the midst of the worst of times for our country. And
and you think about how
experience.
they don't really, understand how, a lot of people don't understand how complex our area of law is. And it just goes to show you how complex it is when, you've got, I don't know how many, probably like a dozen top level civil servants from various, areas, immigration, obviously, and in the various areas within immigration, and CBSA, the border agency. We have public health at the beginning there, and, Department of Labor. I mean, all these professionals. And if you'd asked a question and they, about something that they weren't immediately responsible for, they often didn't know the answer, which is fair. But, it shows you how we have to be a master of everything.
Yes.
Right? I mean, we really have to know everything about all those different areas. And otherwise we're negligent. So it's an incredibly complex area. And I think that those meetings have been invaluable, not only for us to share. I mean, they don't even know when their systems are down, right? And when people can't even log in, they don't really even understand that there's a problem. And then they've got to go to their third party people and, to sort of go and try to fix it. So we have been alerting them, frankly, every time the system goes down, and then they, and so we have that direct contact with them, which is great. The other thing is, it's interesting for us to understand when we're advising our clients and our membership, the fact even that they're digitizing, right? I mean, they're digitizing all the paper-based applications with a third-party agency, a company, and then they're able to then, I guess, transfer it to the officers who may be working remotely, and to understand how the pandemic has hit them. I mean, I also don't mind sharing. I mean, I asked a couple awkward questions about, who was working and who was not working, and you don't want to be rude. So you've got to sort of ask it in a sensitive way. But I think just asking the question sometimes puts them on notice that we're kind of aware that that there's a problem because we weren't seeing a lot of movement. And of course, they were saying that technology, was part of the issue in COVID and everything else. But then, I guess in the private bar, when you see a lot of young, women lawyers who have kids at home and they're balancing the kids, and the kids are not going to school and they're still running their practices, and they're not going to the office, but they're managing to deal with other clients from home and everything else. And you see the pivot that had to happen instantly in the private bar. And then you kind of wonder what's going on, 3 months later, 6 months later, a year later. And, that some of the processing centers are in areas of Canada where there's not a lot of COVID. And you're sort of wondering, what's happening. And then the reports come out that, oh, well, there was this percentage of civil servants that were staying home and weren't working. And so, we did ask those questions that were sometimes awkward questions to ask. But, again, it's just sort of, as lawyers, we have a duty. We've taken an oath. We have a duty to the public. We have a duty to our clients. And I think we take that very seriously. And we just try to, to sort of flag issues, but also help in any way we can. And I think that, these these meetings, I guess what I'm saying, are mutually beneficial, right? Because we help them, we tell them when their tech is down, and they help give us insight into why certain things are taking longer, and a lot of it's legitimate, right? Because they are, sometimes things are crashing because they're dealing with a very old system, the GCMS system. That we know they're moving to a new platform, but we also know that in moving to a new platform, they have to keep the existing one running, and they've got to invest money into it, and they've got to. So they're dealing with very complicated things, and a lot of times, our membership doesn't always understand, frankly, that the challenges are real and legitimate. And our job has been to sort of say, well, this is why, and we've raised this with them, and here's the explanation. And I think that it's been well received. So I think it's just demonstrates the importance of having these kinds of communications. And CPSA is getting better and better too. I would add. I think that they're although we may not always agree with some of their decisions around not sharing internal policies, they have given us at least some stuff, and at least they've heard our plea. And they've heard our pitch that we are partners and we can help them, just as we've helped them in the past. So I think some relationships we're still working on to try to build trust, and there are obstacles that have nothing to do with lawyers that get in the way of that. But we do our best, and I think we're making progress.
Yeah, I agree. And that's one of the biggest things you identified, is that even our members sometimes don't fully understand what's happening on the other side. And one of the more challenging roles that we have is when we have to relate to our own members that, look, these are legitimate realities. And although we would like to see it happen in a different way, we would like to see things moving forward, that, I just keep coming back, Ravi, to the fact that these are real individuals, the heads of the departments, they are real people. And when I saw them, their genuine desire to hear from us, to figure out where the problems were, to come up with creative solutions. And they did come up with a bunch of creative things, even the landing processes from within Canada. And these magical emails that would just come, congratulations, you're a permanent resident, right? And so, I think whenever there's a pandemic or whenever bad things happen like this, it does give an opportunity to look seriously at the way things are. And it exposes and shines a light on problems that were always there, but they're just exacerbated in the context of a pandemic. And one of those obviously was the online system. And I like to think of it like your computer hard drive that's about 99% full. Really, that's what it is. And when your computer is full of data, it can't function, it crashes. It's no different than GCMS. And I remember back, and I think it was 2003, Ravi, when I was hearings, they called me a pro bono slave, basically to the hearings officers in Calgary. And I remember the one hearings officer, Kathy King, who still is working. She was a program manager at Guatemala for a little while, but she's back now in Calgary. But when I was working with her, she had been on one of the first working groups for the GCMS. And that was back in 2003. And it took another 3 years or so before it was fully operational. But that's how old. Think about a software program that was designed in 2000, probably 2001, 2002, and we're still using it. So it's not surprising. It's been stretched farther than it was ever intended to be used. And the amount of data that's contained in there now is just overwhelming the system. So as we know, they're also have engaged another party to pull and strip that data away so that they can free up space for the system to continue functioning over the next couple of years. And I think in our last meeting, they'd mentioned that I think the projections were between 2 and 7 years for them to develop and roll out, this new system at the same time that they're trying to keep the existing one going. So yeah, it seems like every day, like I tried to log in today, no dice, right? One of the lawyers, she posted in our listserv that she has not been able to access her rep portal for three
days,
weeks, right? I think she said 3 weeks. And so you can imagine the panic. And so that's, as the CBA executive, those are the things that we work with our members, relay them to the government. And the work that we're doing for the rep portal is no different than everyone else's MyCIC account. It's the same system. And when they're telling us that the officers themselves can't even access the system on their end, then we know there's issues. And And so anything that we can do, it's not just all about us, is it, Ravi? It's not just about, how we can position ourselves to be the best provider of information to our own clients and we hoard it. We don't share that information with anyone else. That is not the case. The work that we do far, far exceeds the direct benefits to our own individual clients, but it's really designed to try to make things better for everyone. And so that's where I feel like, these mountains of money they're paying us to do this, which is $0. We get paid back in just feelings that we're making a difference, right? And none of us got into immigration law.
Yeah.
I was going to say, none of us, Ravi, got into immigration law to be rich, right? We did not do that. I would have stayed on the securities floor, at the national firm instead of doing immigration if it was about money. But it's about genuinely making a difference in people's lives. And when I look at the comments, Ravi, here, and I see the people who are just pleading, like, make some kind of change, allow us to be reunited with our spouses. This has been, I can't even imagine being away from my spouse for a week, let alone like a year and a half or 2, or sometimes 3 or 4. And so we feel for you. And like anyone, we advocate, we do the best we can on our end. But at the end of the day, until those borders are opened, there's not a lot of solutions to resolve this. So, but anyways, you were going to say something, Ravi.
No, I was just going to say, it's true. When you talk about the volunteer work, and how there's, yes, you're in terms of what's the motivation. For me, I remember when it was, these orders and councils started coming out, and I was spending like weekends, reading them and digesting them and answering these questions like you talked about. Part of it is, I just wanted to know what the law was. That's just sort of like a fundamental obligation I think we have to ourselves as lawyers, and to our clients, is to understand what the law is. And then but yes, it was a lot of time where, I'd read it and then I'd read what's on the website, and the website would contradict the order in council, which is of course the law. And then I felt like every time there was a program delivery instruction, which is sort of the guidance, I'd read that, I'd catch a bunch of mistakes. So I felt like I was honestly like a free proofreader for the government, and then I would tell them about it, and then they would change it, and then a month later there'd be another one, and then I'd have to look there again. So it just felt like a lot of kind of grunt work, but having the guidance on the website I thought was kind of important to be accurate, because that's frankly what the officers are relying on. And a lot of our assisting staff at our firms and the lawyers, when they're putting things together, they may quote at the beginning of a legal submission from the order in council, but then they kind of go in and they reference some of the guidance, because they know that's what the officers will look at. And you know this because you were a CBSA officer, right? So I think that's where it was a lot of it was just exhausting. I think it felt like I was back in university again. And so a lawyer, I had a conversation with someone, a lawyer at a large firm, and practicing in a different area. And he asked me how things are going. He says, "Are you still working from home? Are you, in your home office?" I'd said, "Yeah, I'm working from home." And I said, "But it feels like, it's just constant, because I've got my whole setup here, and I can have dinner and come back, and it's easier than being on your phone when you're finished a work day from your downtown office. You've got your whole setup, so you can continue working." He says, "Yeah, it's sort of like you're sleeping from work." Right. And that's what it feels like. It feels like this past year, it's felt like the work has been just constant, because we're doing all this volunteer work to sort of understand the law and help the government provide recommendations, fix the errors, which and the inconsistencies, and they've been quite gracious about it. They're not, they thank us, and they correct things, and I don't know if they're embarrassed or what. I think they understand we're lawyers and we're going to look at things carefully, and but you're right. We're not paid for this, and I hope that they appreciate us, and that's why I think it's been a little bit disheartening to see them make some moves to cut lawyers out and representatives out, and some of the reasons they're doing that we know has nothing to do with their faith and trust in lawyers. I think that they understand that lawyers are ethical, and you might get one every once in a while who who isn't, but I mean, probably 99.9%.
And we will get those disbarred, and Ravi, we will get those lawyers disbarred as fast as we possibly can.
Well, that's right. I mean, we have an obligation to report them even when we encounter anything that's off, and we have a very strong regulator. So I think that the challenging thing is that we get sort of lumped in, and we see that with the skepticism from the Department of Labor. When we talk to officers and they say, well, we've had these people who have, created, profiles and done things without the clients even knowing about it. We've seen that with so many different areas of different government departments, different agencies. So, and now the government, as they're trying to move more online and quickly, they're saying, well, we just don't have the time to sort of build in the representative and that kind of stuff. So we've been sort of pushing back on that, and I think effectively, I think that they've been open with us, and they've been communicating how they're going to ensure that clients have the right under Section 91 of the Act to be represented, and they see that we have the expertise. I mean, I tell clients all the time, I took tax in law school, but I don't file my own taxes because I just don't do it all day long, right? And I know, like our team, we have teams that we work with, and they have such expertise. And we have the legal expertise, and we know the law, and we keep up with the law, and they have certain expertise too, and that's the way it was always supposed to be, working together and creating a great result for the client. So, I think that the relationship with government is even our relationship is even helping with that. As the government, they might have been tempted to go off in a direction without ever even caring or what we thought or consulting us on it, but because they're meeting with us regularly, because they need us, frankly, and because we've demonstrated how helpful we can be with all of the volunteer time that we're putting in, it's benefiting our membership, and it's actually benefiting at the end of the day the clients who want to have proper representation, professional representation, and don't feel comfortable doing it on their own, and value what we can offer them. So yeah, it's been I think in that sense, even some of the more difficult challenges, we're getting through them, and it's not easy, but we're continuing to work with them.
Yeah. One thing, Ravi, I want to point out just and focus on so that people understand the information that is on the government website is not the law. And sometimes individual applicants, representatives, sometimes they treat it as such. And like Ravi identified numerous times, things were posted that were not consistent with the actual law. So either the interpretation or there was a mistake. And I could point to probably 5 spots right now on the immigration website that I know that relate specifically to express entry that are not clear, that are misleading, and that don't follow the actual law. And that's something that we do as lawyers. We don't just rely on what immigration says is, their policy. Now, obviously their policy is pretty persuasive, but when we feel like it doesn't line up with the law and the legislation, then we step up and we point that out. We challenge them when there are things that are just not right and correct. We don't just roll over. And that is how overall our efforts in doing that make the system better. And even when you talk about transparency, Ravi, there was so much for years when they shifted away, when they closed all of the small offices where people couldn't just go up to a counter and talk to someone about the problems they were having. There were fewer and fewer options and fewer places for people to turn. While we were here, we were always here. And, and I'm finding even now, Ravi, I'm doing more individual consultations with people than I ever did in my life, and you're probably the same way. People that just need a little bit of guidance, a little bit of direction. They've come as far as they can, and there is nowhere to get an answer. And, over the last year, we've had a lot of situations where we haven't been able to give them a clear answer. And as an immigration lawyer, not being able to tell someone exactly, how to proceed, or to give them advice that's going to allow them to actually plan and have certainty has been probably one of the most stressful aspects of our practice right now. Having someone, can I board with my family? Can I, am I eligible to be reunited with this family? And then having airlines, who in and of themselves are making decisions that are, often more defensive in refusing to board people that really should be allowed to be boarded. And then even officers. And like you pointed out, like I worked on the border as an officer. And I remember, Ravi, back in, I think it was 2002, there was the G8 summit in Calgary. And so I was working on the border, the Alberta-Montana border, and there were lots of buses coming up from California protesting, the ones that were driven by, the fry oil from McDonald's. They were, environmental protesters and things like that. And it was drilled into us on the border. Don't be the guy that lets in the terrorist that blows everyone up at the G8. And so what did we do? We looked for ways to turn people back. We found whatever we could hang our hat on to say, you know what, I'm not going to let you in. And it's no different now. You have officers, and I've already seen what happened to the border officers that let some people in and got into the news, and that, and so officers don't want to be that guy or that girl that is going to be making that decision, that's going to allow someone in that then infects a whole bunch of people and causes death. And so they're erring on the side of caution, and I can't blame them. I'll be honest. As frustrating as it is, it's hard to blame them if I was in their shoes making those decisions. But I think we all just want it to end, don't we? I think we just all want it to move on, and it's for me, this is my office now, and but for you and other lawyers that have firms, that collegiality, that ability to get together, that ability to talk and share. Yeah, we can do it through Zoom, but there's limitations with that. And so being able to just, come together again, I think we're all really desperately waiting for that to happen. So,
yeah, it's going to be nice. It's, I think there are benefits. I mean, as I said to someone recently, you can be in multiple places at once. I mean, I could be, in Ottawa having a meeting, and I could be speaking at a conference, and I could be, a Canadian conference, and there was a US conference. I remember one week I was supposed to be at, and, I was doing everything at once because I was right here, and I was, in time to sort of play with my kids at night and have dinner with them. And so you could do everything. So there's definitely benefits. I think maybe it's not an either or, right? I mean, maybe, maybe you can do a bit of both. Like I don't think I'm going to go back every single day. I think, I'll probably go back, like whatever. I mean, there's going to be some kind of balance there.
You're right.
And I think that once things settle down, I mean, it's great to sort of get together with colleagues, have a lunch with them, even if you're, in a more remote area, right? I mean, you can certainly get together with colleagues, and just see them all and just bounce or pick up the phone or whatever. And you can gain that collegiality. But on your other point, I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, the government guidance. I mean, I know, for instance, there's still this guidance that you have to apply for a work permit 30 days in advance. Well, where does that come from? That there's nowhere in the law. I get clients confused about that all the time. And I've just noticed that the consultations I'm getting are more and more complex. And this is where I think that, that we need to do a better job of explaining to government what we do. I mean, it's not as if, it's simple stuff. I mean, it can be, I just had a consultation just, half an hour ago where, there was a complicated situation with a daughter from a previous marriage, and custody, and this person had tried to submit a spousal sponsorship, didn't deal with that properly. The child was Canadian, didn't know how to deal with that. The person's living abroad, didn't really know how to deal with the intention issue. If you're a Canadian citizen living abroad and sponsoring a spouse, you have to show you have the intention to come to Canada. Like 3 major kind of complicated legal issues. Person applied on their own, the whole thing was returned to them. So what I like to say to people is, yes, Canada likes immigration, and yes, a lot of politicians will go on and on about it. And entire sections of a visa office on the one side will be all about trying to foster trade and encourage people to come to Canada and open up businesses, everything else. And on the other side is the immigration side, and the visa office side, and they're dealing with incredible volume sometimes and incredible pressure to meet processing times. And you and I both know that what that means is that things get refused. And so this gentleman was talking to me. He said, well, you know, it was returned and it looks like it was just a small thing. And if I just put it back in, I guess everything else is fine with the application, right? And I said, no. What's happened is the immigration officer has done a quick scan. Well, I guess in this case, it's probably just a clerk. But so the clerk chucked it back. But let's say an immigration officer had looked at something and actually issued a refusal. Well, that doesn't mean that the officer is committing to you that the rest of it is 100% perfect. Yeah. No, they've just scanned and find the easiest way to refuse the application and kicked it back. And then I say to people, I said, you know, we live in this era of instant communication. They ask you for your cell phone, they ask you for your email address. Do you think that they're going to call you if they notice that you forgot to fill out a little section? And they're going to say, oh, you forgot to put NA there, not applicable. We're going to call you up and say, hey, what did you mean to put there? And I'll just pencil it in for you. No, they don't do that. They will potentially return the whole file. And so I tell people all the time, you should be able to do things on your own. Certain applications you should be able to file on your own. Unfortunately, you know, it has become extremely complex. I think the people in operations sometimes want to make it simpler and simpler and simpler. And then what we understand is the policy folks of the department understand that there's so many, you know, complicated situations that can arise that you can't make it that simple. And so they can't sort of dumb down the forms, and they've got to make it a little bit more vague. And then people get confused as to how to fill them out, and then they can get banned for 5 years for misrepresentation. And so, you know, so I used to tell people, you know, this you don't need me for and whatever. And then I realized people would get mad at me. You know, they come back to me a few months later and say, oh, this was returned to me. How come you didn't tell me that this could happen? And you should have told me to hire you. So now I just tell people, look, I mean, unfortunately, the system's unforgiving. Immigration's not your friend. And, you know, we're in your corner, and we'll make sure things are done the right way. And we'll give you a copy of everything, and we'll be very transparent about things. And we're happy to help you, you know, and at the end of the day, we could probably save you months of headache and potentially a refusal that's improper. Because I think, Mark, I'm sure you've had this too, where you've had extremely genuine cases. I think of so many genuine marriages where the couples are sitting in front of me, and it's obvious that they're a genuine couple, and they've been refused. Some of them have even had children. And I tell people this, I say, there have been refusals by the department where a couple have had kids together, and it's been upheld, you know, at the Immigration and Refugee Board as a marriage of convenience, if you can believe it, as if a child is worth 50 grand or whatever the going rate is for a fake marriage. So this is our system, and I get no greater satisfaction than helping, you know, unsophisticated, vulnerable, often racialized, marginalized people navigate it successfully, whether it's in the appeals courts or whether it's you know, or whether it's informally, because we've been able to learn how the system works and how to escalate things, or whether it's, you know, so formally, informally, or just by doing a good job from the outset. It's so satisfying and gratifying when you can achieve that result. And that is why we got into this, right? I mean, that, you know, when you talk about why we got into this field, nobody goes into this field because they want to be rich. I mean, you may end up being successful because you're honest with people, and that honesty, you know, spreads, and then people come to you because they realize there's so many who are dishonest. So I think I have become, you know, more successful than I ever thought I would be, simply because I had a very good mentor, Mendel Green, and a good firm, Green and Spiegel, where the family and the people that work there have that value. Our main value is integrity. And turning people away and not taking on H&Cs, like humanitarian and compassionate cases, just because you didn't, you know, make the parental lottery. I mean, turning away business every single day. And ironically, by doing the right thing and by being taught to do the right thing and having those values instilled in us in our law school training and through our articling internships and with good firms and good people and gentlemen and gentlewomen, that experience has led to people desperate to have an honest opinion, and so that has led to some success. But I mean, I think that,
Yep.
you know, you're right. I mean, the goal was to go into this field to help people, and to help people who are, you know, really vulnerable. And anyway, and it's a very rewarding field. So I hope that if people are considering getting into it, that they realize how satisfying and gratifying it can be.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been great, Ravi. I really appreciate the time that you've taken here. We went and we just about closed in on an hour here. This is quite
Wow.
the episode, but hopefully it gave people a little bit more idea as to what was happening on the other side. So sometimes people, you know, and you're the same as I am. You know, I'm often I'm also often pulled into tweets to, you know, Minister Mendocino about the family reunification issue and the borders being closed. And, you know, genuinely, if I could wave a wand and just fix it, I would do it in a heartbeat. So in the background, know that we're not flashy. Like, we're not out there, you know, pounding ourselves on the chest. We don't do, you know, repeated op-eds and every opportunity we can to promote how wonderful we are. We tend to do our work in the backgrounds. We tend to be, you know, quietly just serving. That's what it is to be a lawyer. That's what it is to be an immigration lawyer. It's service. And so to have an opportunity today just to talk a little bit about what happened, you know, last year, and that's continuing to move forward here. We're hoping that we're going to see a light at the end of the tunnel, but we do this because we care, full stop. And, you know, we may not always agree with everyone out there. We may not, you know, always align. Our interests may not always align with everyone out there, but I can tell you one thing that they can never, ever question is whether or not we care. And clients feel that it resonates with them. And that's why, Ravi, they keep coming back. Right. And I wish I could duplicate myself. Right. I wish you could be tripled and quadrupled, you know, because of the ability to reach and touch lives as much as possible. And really, that's why I've created this, Ravi. It's because I know that we could have this conversation with a group of 10 people, or we could have thousands that will watch this after and receive the benefits. So that's the one, you know, the evolution of technology. I'm so grateful for it. The ability to amplify our message. And hopefully this was helpful for people. Now, there's some people that have posted a lot of questions that I haven't pulled on. And I want to direct you guys back to my Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. That's when I have the immigration Q&A, where it's open season. You can ask whatever you want. I'm happy to answer the questions and things like that. Those of you who have expressed your frustration and and just, you know, about your situation, and that there doesn't look like there's going to be a resolution to it, we feel for you. Our hearts go out to you. You know, we're working in our ways to try to make things better. But at this stage, you know, as long as we've got this pandemic, there's going to be certain realities that are just going to prejudice people. But know that we hear you, and you know, we're working in the background in our quiet but effective way to make differences. So thank you so much, Ravi, and I really, really appreciated you joining. I put a link to your bio in the description for this live stream. So if people want to learn more about Ravi and his firm and all the awesome things that they're doing, all you need to do is click on that link and it'll take you to the firm website. And you can learn about all the amazing accomplishments Ravi's had in his very, very distinguished career. And he's midstream. You know, he's probably got another 40 years ahead of him here. So, but he's
well, and Mark, as you always say to everyone, thank you for all that you do and for all the work you're doing. You're a wonderful chair, and you take the time to thank people for their volunteer contributions at every opportunity. And I want to say to you and to your viewers, thank you for all that you are doing. You are giving people who are very frustrated and you know, in pain, an outlet, and you're communicating with them in a very genuine way. And the bar thanks you. You're the chair, but from the past chair to the current chair, I just want to say you're doing a wonderful job and wonderful work. So thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, Ravi. I appreciate it. All right. Well, we'll thank everybody for joining us. And yeah, until we bring on someone else, I can't remember who I have lined up next, Ravi, but maybe Lisa's going to come join me. We'll see. And she can talk about some Quebec-based issues. But thanks so much. It was great having you and just the insight and everything. All the best to you and your family and your practice and all the wonderful people that have the privilege of being represented by you and your firm. So,
Pleasure.
all right. Okay, take care. See everyone.
Take care.